the
Gladly,
accepts donations if you feel so inclined on the following. So,
and maybe I won't say what I was going to say.
we'll probably say it all.
What I will say is that what I understand is that Matt
And his colleague Alex have,
drafted
and I think submitted a proposal
to village council with
recommended changes for zoning. So they're definitely engaged and motivated about this topic. And I'm looking forward to
hearing what to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, to continue where Susan left off, the thing that we submitted on September 19th is a suggestion to allow duplexes, apartments, and I can't remember what the third one is, throughout the village and not just in residential C and residential B, which are the high density and medium density parts of town. Anyway, my name is Matt Raska, and I got interested in zoning reform in about April of 2021 because everyone was fighting over Airbnbs, and I thought that if we just supply and demand allow for more apartments and units to be built in town, we could probably affect our housing demands and housing supply more effectively and by a policy side. Oh, hold on.
You have to use them.
Yeah, how do I? Yeah,
Can I help you?
yeah, this is Alan.
Hi, I'm
Alex
Alan
Miller.
Bell, and I'm also a villager. Matt and I have been working on this
Yeah.
for years now.
Years. Plural, two. Oh, wow, yeah. We're coming up on the anniversary, cut a cake. And this is John Hempling, who has also been working on us with this and numerous others, but these are the ones that I could drag away from their families so as to present for free. Thank you, guys. But we got interested in zoning reform in 2021. And the first step to allowing more units to be built in Yellow Springs was to remove the obstacles in local law to more diverse types of construction, like the aforementioned duplexes and apartments. And if you guys feel really strongly about either of these slides, you just jump in. One of the things that I think would appeal most in the senior center context is the concept of a naturally occurring retirement community, which in broad strokes has amenities and points of interest, high levels of community and civic engagement, and is walkable. You can find a lot of these throughout the country. A great number are in New York and older parts of most towns, the more traditionally designed parts of town. For example, you can feel that every time. What is happening over here? Stop taking my. So you can see that desirability in the traditional layout of a city here in Yellow Springs. A Newark is not a pre-planned astroturf village. It's not a community without schools or an economy, and it's not a retirement home.
Yeah, so what is a good place to age in that by its nature? And how does zoning interact with this? This is kind of what we're getting at. So the density piece, the blockability piece creates by itself, just as the consequence of the form of the that the zoning creates, or the lack thereof, which was the case in Yellow Springs. Are you again?
Why have the slideshow?
Rather than what today is marketed to seniors as a good place for seniors to live, which we all know is sort of often the opposite. It's kind of a parody. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, so older cities were designed. So, Yellow Springs goes back to, I think, 1823, time before horses, or not time before horses, but the time before cars. And, you can see that throughout the village. You can see how closely it's packed together, like the historic district is from, not Wheeling, go on.
Who's the other guy?
Milk.
Thank you, Mel.
William Mills. They used to also have many, many different uses packed side by side. For example, by allowing these mixed uses again, and allowing more population density, we not only give people places to walk from, but places to walk to. For example, you can see a lot of these places kind of renewing in Yellow Springs and just remaining in Yellow Springs on South High Street. On the left, you see Bootleg Bagels. On the right, you see the Blue House Bakery, Michael James Hair Salon, Electro Shield, the Coactive with Edward Jones and the Morgan Family Foundation and Adoption Link. These are all businesses that are in residential neighborhoods. The Experimental Farm, where you can go and get beans, or the Forest Village Farms, where you can go and get some eggs. And a long time ago, you could have gone to your neighborhood bar, Combs, or you could have gone to Gabby's place, which was down the road from me, on my street, on South Stafford Street. Can any of you guys name some other places that were in the residential parts of town that?
We don't know.
Been?
Yeah, is there any cultural memory of things that we didn't mention here?
I'm told Nora's Pay As You Can was maybe in residential, but I'm told it was also not.
A little different, but scattered through parts of the older part of town, there also are some buildings that were old schoolhouses back in the days. They're non-residential.
Yeah, like the
Now, there's one on Park Place, and there's one on,
Elm, the black schoolhouse, as the case may be.
Oh, those the brick ones with the columns, the columns.
well, it's like at the corner of West South College and High Street. Right, and there's a schoolhouse.
Yeah. And then we know on Walnut, there was the tavern, which is Kay's house now. Across the street was a house of ill repute. You know.
Yeah. And I believe the jail is right there.
Right, yeah. The point we're making is that livelihood, you know,
Was not,
places of business was scattered throughout the village.
yeah, it was not confined to the business district. It was all over the place. It was everywhere. You could start it was easiest to start a business in your home if you were, say, a person of lesser means, like, I don't know, the black people in town who just didn't have as much money. You didn't have to have any money to start a business. You didn't have to have any money to rent a place to start a business. You already had a place to start a business. You just did it in your front room. You did it in your back room. You were, you know, a seamstress, or you're a butcher, or baker, a candlestick maker in your own house, and so on and so forth. And you just did it all out of your home.
Yeah, and that's what downtown was, and then those houses were slowly replaced with the storefronts that we've got now. And that would naturally sort of grow from the core, like it has, but then it stopped with the advent of functional zoning.
Yeah, function segregated zoning. Yeah, like you'll almost never see any of these again because they're all in residential districts. That's why they're slowly going away into the ether. The residential part of town is homogenizing into just residences rather than little scattered businesses.
Because that is the intention of the zoning code that was adopted in the 50s, and the one we have now is the legacy of that. And there's good, you know, you don't want a dog food factory next door, so there's reasonable limits, of course.
Yeah, like the Romans would segregate, it's like a fish sauce production from the rest of,
Because it was stinky.
yeah, the rest of their urban centers. Anything besides the schools?
Corner grocery stores. I think that where Michael James's place is was a corner.
Was a corner grocery
Oh,
Oh, cool.
and historically, you had churches in neighborhoods and not centralized.
Yeah, even now, there wouldn't have been a space for a church in over our development.
Yeah.
Which just seems like, gosh, there's a lot of, you know, wouldn't build a neighborhood without one, you know, until the 50s again.
But the old churches that were without parking lots typically back in the day. Now,
Yeah, that's the whole point. If there's somewhere to walk to nearby, you know, the church you attend, you can walk to it and doesn't need a big parking lot that's empty 6.5 days of the week.
Anyway. There are also tangential benefits of mixed use zoning. The environmental impact of cars is reduced because their necessity is reduced. If your businesses are scattered all throughout town, you're more likely to be able to walk to them. You're more likely to have a business to walk to. Kids have places to walk to, and therefore parents are also not necessarily chauffeurs. Making shopping local is easier and making Amazon a little bit less attractive. You get a better return on infrastructure investments from business related uses. And this is from the Tecumseh Land Trust. They subscribe to some service that does surveys and stuff. So you get 30 cents on every dollar put in municipally. It costs you 30 cents on every dollar put in municipally for businesses. And it costs you like $1.16 on services, every dollar you put on services residentially. You can also just, stop at your on your way to your friend's house, on your way to the baker or something like that. I do it all the time when I'm heading down to Tom's. Like I stop at John's and I drag him out there and I drag all his kids and we run in a big convoy. Candies or whatever. A pedestrian community is a physically and socially healthier community. I think we can all picture at least one soulless suburban development, completely devoid of character. And more business is better for the village budget. The taxes on business are much better for the village than the residential taxes for the village, which I think in these soon to be lean times of budgetary reconsideration, very important. So to that effect, in broad strokes, again, our suggested changes are to permit mixed uses in houses or in residential districts, such as home businesses, permit residential uses in business districts, as opposed to conditional uses as well. Permit accessory commercial units by right, accessory dwelling units by right, duplexes, legalize mother-in-law suites everywhere, and reduce off-street parking. Because if you keep building your society for cars, you're going to keep getting a society that's built for cars.
Are there currently restrictions on residential uses in business districts?
Yeah, actually, I think you decided, didn't we decide that the apartments were conditional?
So in our proposal, it is sort of a minor change. You can put apartments above businesses in the business district, but it's still a conditional use. And since we can't imagine that could possibly be harmful, we're recommending that just be a permitted use.
And conditional means that each time it happens, there has to be a specific approval for that particular.
Not just an approval, but planning commission.
Yeah, so it's a hoop to jump through. It's an expense. It's an added cost. And a big part of this is affordability in the village. So if you live in zoning, the A district, there's no duplexes allowed, which means that maybe in
A is the lowest density.
mostly the further away from here part of town. Say family sizes are smaller today, right? More people living alone, more people might like to have a roommate, but not really have a roommate, maybe an apartment for somebody to live in to rent out, maybe a care suite for a caretaker. And that's not allowed. It's just simply out of the question.
Yeah, you
So-
can always have someone stay on the down low, but it's never like explicitly permitted.
Yeah, so that kind of, house splits, adding a thing in the backyard. We just want to lower the barriers, the expense and the time commitment it takes to, and the reassurance that it is possible, because every time there's a conditional use, it might not be possible. And in my line of work, I work with people who design things, I design things like this for people who want them. And I say, well, the village could say, you can't do this here. And that's enough for a lot of people to say, well, actually, okay, maybe I'm just not going to try this project right now. Or I'll, find another way, or I'll just keep living in my giant house and not split it.
So I'd like to point out, though, that, right now, as you mentioned, you can do a lot of these things via conditional use, okay? The time and cost of going through the conditional use approval process is a minuscule fraction of the time and cost involved in constructing things.
So true.
You're gonna build a building, or, cost you $250,000, $500,000. And it costs you $100 or $150 to submit an application.
Yeah, right, but before you submit the application, you have to have done some design work, that has a cost, which would be totally thrown out the window.
In some cases,
In some, well, yeah, I mean, you kind of just. But I have to give planning commission something to look at.
but my point being is you can do these things through conditional approvals. And it's not a particularly onerous process most of the times. The rare case.
Onerous that they can say no.
Yeah.
Well,
That's onerous. Yes, yeah.
But it has to do with community standards when it says, no, like right now, in terms of Airbnbs, you're limited to how many you can have. How close they can be to an existing Airbnb. Because it's sort of, I'd say there sort of was community pushback on whatever. I can't think of other cases in which conditional approvals have.
Yeah,
been denied.
so yes, conditional approvals are mainly permitted, but that's sort of evidence that there's too many things marked as conditional that should just be marked as permitted. For
Not
any use,
necessarily.
for any use that,
I don't agree with that.
I don't
in my,
agree with that.
it's-
Yeah,
if I can finish, please. The way that I've been thinking about it is that if there's a way in which a building use could be harmful, but also maybe could be helpful, then leaving it conditional so that it can be reviewed by the planning commission and giving them full discretion to review that and put conditions in the development make perfect sense. But for building uses that couldn't possibly be harmful, that the community has essentially been demanding more of, for example, apartments in residential districts, it doesn't make sense to make it conditional. That's a barrier when the community has clearly indicated that they want more of that.
But
yeah, I would really challenge that. In a residential district, if you put apartments right next to houses, those apartments have a negative influence on the residences around the apartment, from noise, from coming and going, from just the density. And so it sounds like that is all being cast aside in your proposal. Where in your proposal are you protecting the rights of the people who live in the houses nearby, who are going to be affected by a business which may have noise, may have lots of comings and goings, may change the neighborhood. That happened already in this town. So how do you plan to address the needs of the residents that are already there?
If I may, the main point of our suggestion is to make it easier for people to live in town. Lots and lots of my personal friends have had to leave town because they've been priced out. Like, for example, Lacey, the bartender who raised her kids here at the tavern, has recently had to leave because she can't afford to live in town anymore. The Keegan, who used to work at Calypso, used to live in town, had to leave town because he couldn't afford it anymore. Reagan,
What's the best number for the population of Yellow Springs? Nobody is willing to say what the target number for our population. It's always been about under 5,000 because that was going to have an impact on the government that we could have. So what's your target number for how many people Yellow Springs really should try to include? And, or are we just going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow until we're, not a village?
Well, so I mean, it is possible for the village to
We used to have more people in town. In the 1960s, we had 4,400 people living in town.
And they
Well,
live,
people
and they
included.
live in this area. And not counting the further out developments that are built since then. And so I ask you, who's gonna pay for the infrastructure in the neighborhoods that you live in?
Yeah, we're gonna have to replace the pipes one way or the other. So we can either
It's
ourselves replace them.
Currently, it is not working. And those pipes are relatively new. When they come up for renewal, for needing to be dug up, who's gonna pay for that?
Also, most of the places that would be, these apartments would be permitted in are the lowest density parts of town, which are the only places that we could build apartments.
You said something just a moment ago that I thought was very telling, and I think flawed, that what might be behind your whole motivation is the affordability issue.
Yes, because that's our stated value as a
Okay.
village,
Okay,
right?
let me finish. But you're making an assumption that I challenge with the validity of, that by simply adding more housing, all of a sudden, the town will become more.
If I have a basket of apples and I'm selling them to you all, and it comes down to the last apple, that one's gonna go for the most. And that's what happens to our housing stock every year. There's study after study that verifies that more housing lowers the cost of housing.
But
Supply and demand.
It just is true.
But if you have more housing, it could very well then attract more people.
Yeah.
Well,
That's fine.
we have 50 million climate refugees coming in the next 50 years.
You're making,
Where are they going?
So,
my point though, is you're making a major assumption that if you do this, it'll cause that. That's a big assumption.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm not aware of there being data that clearly backs that.
Okay, so are you for affordability or
wait,
not?
so, and can I piggyback on that point? There
That's
are,
not what we're here to meet.
there are of course areas in town where apartments are already a permitted use in residential zone C. Yet we don't see people just buying up those houses and turning them into apartments. Most of residential zone C is still houses. Our expectation is not that if our proposal goes through, that this will have a radical impact on the size or density of the village.
Our estimation was maybe one more house per year.
It's very slow.
So it sounds like really,
One more unit.
all you really want to see is trying to see where it makes sense to convert residential A to residential B or C.
Yeah.
Districts here and there, and not incorporate unique and different changes necessarily to zoning code.
Well, you think there are some changes we're suggesting there?
I do have a question. I'm just gonna give an example. I live on, West Davis Street. Was there, the bar.
Mhm.
It changed hands and there was a lot of problems with, noise, parking, breaks. It really impacted that street. Thanks to being able to have, going in and as a resident and going to planning commission and having that right to express yourself, which I think is really important. Another business, which was a more construction business. We have problems with that, with large amounts of constructions, heavy, large trucks coming in with equipment. And only having parking on one side. It really worries me that what's going to happen to our neighborhoods. And I have seen this in Austin, Texas with a friend where builders and investors have come in, ripped down small houses and built large multi-million-dollar homes. And they aren't building affordable housing. They're building to make a profit. And I'm concerned, and I guess my question is, on your permitted mixed use, clarify with me what a home business is.
According to the Yellow Springs Code, it's stuff like being a masseuse, having a home office, being a psychologist. Those are the typical home businesses that are
That's all
listed.
already allowed,
And that is going to be clarified as to exactly what that is.
Yeah, our proposal that's currently on the table has nothing to do with any of this mixed use stuff.
Yeah, we don't have any proposals even in the like foreseeable future about businesses, although we'd encourage council to look at it. Yes?
Well, I think that if we don't have more infill development, we're gonna keep getting what we have. And what we have is increasing housing expense. More older people can live here, fewer younger people can live here. That trajectory presumably will lead to not having school. Older retired people do not pay income tax to the village. So one of the problems, one of the reasons why the village is in the position it is now is because we don't have enough income coming in compared to the needs of the village. The issue about population size, I moved here in 72 and the village is actually bigger. And there's been this concern about the village growing, but it actually, the size has shrunk. It may come to the point where we would become a city, but that means probably at the average of less than 2 people per house. We can figure out several hundred more homes. And with infill development, as they say, this is a very
Tedious.
slow process. And some of the things that these young men are saying maybe would be rejected, some of them not. For example, if I lived in residence A and I would live by myself and I had a big house, is there any kind of farm for me creating an apartment out of part of the house so that I can have someone live in that apartment to take care of me?
You can do
I don't
that.
think so. No. And why should I think if there's no harm in that, why should it be conditional? And I'll say one more thing, I'll stop. I live on West Davis Street. A number of homes have accessory dwelling. I live in a duplex. There's an apartment on the street, 4 units, 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. Noise certainly is not a problem. I mean, I think I live on one of the best streets in town because there's rental units, there's home ownership units. We now actually have some children on our street again. So I think that there's a fear about renters and accessory dwellings that's oversized to the end.
Yeah, it'll either be rich and really quiet, or it'll be poor and really noisy. So one or the other. We can be affordable or ritzy.
Another end to that is to consider folks who are kind of in the middle of things financially. I mean, folks on fixed incomes in this village are constantly talking about the rising utility costs, the rising taxes, because all of those things continue to go up and their income does not grow proportionally. And so those people are also being priced out. It's a little bit quieter. We don't often talk about our older population the way we do about young people and families, but those are also people who are currently getting priced out of the village. And will continue to do so if we can't stabilize some of those numbers. And I pay pretty close attention to village council and all of the people who come to talk to them about utility costs and reciprocal tax are saying the things that you can do to reduce costs are to add more residents to the village or add more substantial businesses who are going to bring in income tax. And if we're not going to do that by bringing in families or people who are paying income tax, then I think we all need to, there's an article in the paper today saying that There are realtors who want to bring an Amazon warehouse, so to the village. That's another option. So do we, I mean, would we rather have people or would we rather have businesses? Or can we find a happy medium both in order to ease some of the pressure that we are all feeling financially?
Yeah, if the village wants to bring an Amazon warehouse, Amazon will negotiate hard and will not pay taxes. They may create some jobs here. But I have a point to your.
1 second. The budget is so bad, we could fire the entire police department and still be $1.3 million under
This year.
just this year.
And
Because there's lots of spending. You know,
exactly.
it's not just necessities that we're spending on. We're spending on a lot of niceties that
The pool, affordable housing.
will make it more expensive to support the government.
We could eliminate the pool, which costs 80,000. We could eliminate the youth center, which,
We don't have any kids here anyway.
we could stop maintaining the parks. Stop maintaining roads, we could stop maintaining the sidewalks,
But yeah, the sidewalks that are doing great right now.
and we could cut the police. Right, we'll have to look at it.
So as you may have heard, zoning reform is increasingly popular in the country. The Biden administration tried to put money to encourage municipalities to reform their zoning in the Build Back Better plan. And I believe did put money in.
There's $85 million in grants on the table.
Yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act.
Municipalities that do what we're suggesting.
And the reason that they support it is that these municipal zoning laws are reducing the country's basically the economy. One of the methods that they argue would do this, like for example, in a place like Yellow Springs, is that people who work here can't afford to live here. So then they have to live, say, somewhere like Springfield. Well, that means that they have to drive back and forth. Well, that costs them extra money. So they might be a little worse off, but also they'll demand higher wages from the employers downtown, who I think you're all aware have been having difficulty staffing their shops and restaurants.
Yeah, if you ever wondered why like there's no lifeguards at the pool or
And then,
like the people at Tom's keep changing or you can't find a there's no staff.
Hours are reduced, days are, so many days a week.
It's because
And-
it's these kids, these poor people, they're the ones that cook our breakfast and serve us food and bring up our cash registers.
Right, but
And there's none of them here.
But the businesses still have fixed costs, so if they're only open so many days a week, then they have to raise their prices to make the money that they can during those days a week,
And
right?
then only rich people can afford to eat there.
And it's a vicious cycle, and that's what, we've somehow avoided that, having Antioch here, having the disposition that we've had as a village, and we don't look like all the other bombed out towns in Ohio.
So workers are hurt, businesses, the people, the customers, and basically the only entity that benefits from this is the automotive industry, which is, of course, Alex's point, that these zoning laws basically are all focused around building a car-oriented country.
Yeah, where a car is your ticket to participate in the economy.
So you talked about apartments, and I'm not clear when you talk about building more apartments, that there's mother-in-law put after add-ons, but then are you talking about an apartment unit in a space where there is no space that's 4 units, 8 units, 10 units? Could you be more specific?
I mean, it depends on I think right now we're just suggesting up to triplexes, which fall under the residential code in all the residential districts, where currently they're allowed in C and B, the denser districts.
The older districts, the parts that have been built out for the last 150 years.
Do you have a map with the 8 units?
Yeah, I'll crack it open. We're done with this slide. Let's move on.
Village in that way.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's a lens that I'm all too used to.
Keep talking. Let the debate.
Oh, I want to talk to your points
Yeah, please.
about confirmed, I think is the word. What?
Filtering.
Filtering is what the economists call it. So when you've got, 3 people looking for a house and they're, the rich person in the middle income and the lower income. And and there's one house for sale, the rich person gets it. And then the other two have to go somewhere else, go to Springfield, go to Fairborn. But if somebody builds a luxury house, that rich person now comes in and has something, I like this and I can pay for it. I don't need to buy this old house and fix it up or whatever. That's, so now there's options. It's as simple as that, and it happens all the way down. The middle people kick out the poor people, and the poor people, they're always at the end.
Can I just ask one other question real
Yeah.
quick? How are you addressing parking with zoning changes? Because that can be a real issue. And, I know you're encouraging walkability, but most people work out of Yellow Springs. They have to have cars. So how are you accommodating with the zoning reform for parking issue?
So the current zoning already has really high off-street parking requirements for essentially all uses. So anything new that's built is under the current zoning code is going to have definitely enough parking spaces and then some. We're not suggesting that one not have any not supply enough parking to be reasonable, but it's in our view, on-street parking should also be considered in the calculation.
But anyway, to address the question about the zoning map, you
There
can
it
see
is.
the different shades of peach, orange, red. The bright blood red that you see there is
Business.
the business
You
district.
are here.
The dark orange that you see is residential C, which is the high density portion of the village. The peachy color is the residential B, and the yellow color is the residential A. So orange high density, peach medium density, yellow low density. This purple stuff is planned unit development, like you got Littlewood here, Park Meadows, Thistle Creek.
Could be anything.
Yeah, it could be anything. You get like a lot of leeway when you're doing a planned unit development, unless it gets shot down in planning commission. Well, at village council. You can see the Antioch here in the dark blue, or in the only blue. But I guess the takeaway I would have from this map is this is totally arbitrary. None of this zoning existed when William Mills did this. Like he said, he laid down a grid plot like the Romans did and said, build whatever you like. It didn't exist until 1954. And you can see a lot of the construction in town since 1954 has been here and here in this light yellow, this low density residential.
Northwood at the top.
Yeah. And by way of tangentially addressing infrastructure in context of density, the Yellow Springs density is about the same as Jackson, Mississippi's density, which means that we have about the same number of people paying into our infrastructure as Jackson, Mississippi did.
Yeah, at a per capita level. And so if you look at the whole village, all the people that live in the whole thing used to live, in this much. And so the same number of people only have to pay to fix this number of roads and sidewalks and schools and everything else. And now, we built these. I'm trying to find the answer to how much it costs to pave college and that section of Allen recently. And who paid for that?
It depends on what the ground is like underneath. That was my answer from Greg Smith. It's like, it depends if you're building on a swamp or if you're building on like a solid piece of clay. It's totally wild.
Yes,
Is that light yellow portion,
that's the A.
is that always part of the village, but nobody lived there, or
It was
annexed that?
No,
It was farms, yeah.
it's been added onto. It used to be farms, probably. I don't have my data in front of me,
But friends care.
So did we annex that in order to support a rising population or in order to attract a population to what maybe was starting to decline or something?
Well, I mean, it's indicative of the trend that it represents what America did everywhere. So, we had our walkable grids, and then cars came along, and trains went away, and trolleys went away, and we all said, well, let's create vast expanses of sidewalk, and I'll just drive to wherever we're going. And it had mixed results. Obviously, financially, there are problems, and health issues in terms of not walking anymore. And then, yeah, the ticket to be part of the economy is having, you know, one car or however many people work that number of cars.
I don't know which one of you guys have zine number 2, because I only have like 7 of them. But there's a comparative cost analysis in there of about like 10 neighborhoods in town. So for example, like Park Meadows has the most number of units per like length of road. It's like the most profitable to the village. Whereas I want to say it's the President Rice Allen neighborhood has like the lowest number of people, lowest number of units per length of road. And that means that you have a lower number of people supporting more roads, more telephone wires, more pipes, more sidewalk icing, more post office delivery, more, you know, you name it, anything that has a foot length attached to it being maintained.
So, to answer your question, and if anyone has the real answer and I'm giving wrong information, go ahead and jump in, because I've not actually gone through the newspaper, you know, microfilm on that particular point. But I've heard that there's been multiple rounds of basically the college creating neighborhoods for faculty, and that explains several.
The college, I think, owned a lot of that, 1, 2, first 1, 2.
Oh, okay, so everyone's saying that that's.
I lived in an apartment on Rice Road for a little while. A really nice block. Illegal, not allowed. But it was a professor's house, and it was 3 apartments owned by Dunphy when I lived there. And it was
Sunrise, there's a lot.
And it was for me, it was a great option, you know, being young. This was 09.
Man, look at that.
And
no apartments allowed on Rice Street.
And there they are, 3 of them, and it's I don't think it's damaging the neighborhood much.
I lived in that apartment 50 years ago.
Was it helpful for you?
50 years ago, sure, yeah.
So,
But does that mean that it's the same if we build 17 more apartments in the houses that are there?
Would you begrudge 17 people living here?
Actually, I still want to find out what the desired population of Yellow Springs is supposed to.
I think we're evading your point, because there isn't a number that, I mean, I think the optimum population for the planet is probably less than 8 billion. I don't get a choice about that. I think we all deserve to make our way as best we can. And Yellow Springs is a good foundation, a framework for more people to live in than live here now. And it's got to change, because we're not going to be able to pay for it the way we're doing now.
Someone asked how big the village is. In 1960, it was 1.8 square miles. But by my best guess, it kind of varies depending on if you count the Antioch as part of it. And if you're using the Gazetteer from 2022 versus 2021. But the village is 2.555 square miles. Best guess.
We should have length of street.
Yeah, I don't have that.
Yeah, that would be good.
On with your presentation.
Yeah. Oh, I figured this would be a mosh pit. Let it go.
I keep coming back to everything you're talking about, virtually everything you're talking about could be accomplished with more residential B zoning. And as well as use of conditional.
I bet it is too, because.
Yeah.
Hey, someone's on mute.
That was good fast.
Yeah, I mean, there's already a mechanism, I think. Now, the trick with the residential B is if, you know, I don't know what sort of gyrations you'd have to go through, that you could take undeveloped area that's already zoned A and get it zoned B. I'm
No spot zoning, you know, you've been to all that meeting. Yeah.
I know, but once again, that could be, you know, there could be a rationale.
That's not what the people with the money want to do. I think we've got a proposal
Don't
for.
blame the people with the money.
So
You're talking about these people with the money.
Well, they don't get to do what they want.
So
They
Gary,
don't get to do what you want unless you make laws that tell them what to do.
We're good at the old people.
You know,
Gary, our proposal is almost exactly equivalent to what you're suggesting. It just accomplishes it through different code changes.
I have a question. Can you change the zoning of someone's house? Can village council like say you're residential A, but now you're residential B?
I don't think so.
They can and have done.
Yes, but not, as they were saying, in spot zoning. So, for example, I think the last time this was done, C was, increased down Xenia Avenue and along.
Yeah.
Oh,
And along
so the
Winter
village passed a
Street
law just-
and Stafford Street and it, that has been rezoned.
I might add that in the 1980s, the Ogre was going to put in something like 40 units of straight up affordable housing, and it was fought to death in planning commission.
Yeah, an apartment building.
So can I ask, changing the zoning for some particular area, is that good or bad, or is it, neutral? I'm not sure what the,
That's what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, community changes, community needs change, community values.
but if I lived in whatever those areas were that changed, what did that do to that area? Did it make it easier to build additional housing
Well,
or
like
less
community
easier?
and residence act.
I can
Yeah.
speak to
So-
that
So,
with my own experience in this community. We originally lived in a house that was in Residence B. And it was recently rezoned to be Residence C. It was an affordable neighborhood. The houses were small, are small. The lots are tiny. And it's the affordable old neighborhood. And now it's slowly being melded into the downtown district. So there aren't people living there quite so much
Because
because it's been now,
businesses can now
because,
situate around here that couldn't before.
right,
Where was this?
Winter Street,
Oh, yeah. We used to live on Winter Street. South Winter Street or North Winter Street?
North Winter Street.
Are there businesses on North Winter Street besides the old jailhouse? Not much has
The
changed.
jailhouse wasn't there, that would, is not, people don't live in the jailhouse. They used to, but they don't anymore.
Carla doesn't live there anymore?
Not that I know.
That's
As far as I know,
another-
it's a transient housing. And then there's a women's retreat in a house that used to be a residence and now it's a business.
Actually, that's reserved for residents of the region.
We haven't gotten to our suggestion we haven't even gotten through our suggestion for apartment buildings yet with planning commission, but transient guest lodging would not be on our suggested allowances for
We
mixed use one
disagree
way or the
about
other.
that, but it's not on our proposal.
Yeah, but that's what, in order for your proposal to be helpful to the people already here.
Mhm.
Okay, the planning commission has to have pretty reasonable targets for what businesses they would allow, what areas they would change from low density to high density. I mean, that has to be done in a reasonable and a fair way. And that you do by planning and planning commission and, government oversight.
But we don't,
If I may, share an anecdote from the Great Chicago Fire. Before the Great Chicago Fire of 18, whatever it was, the city required all businesses that wanted to operate in the city of Chicago to come forward and present themselves to their equivalent of planning commission, to prove their worth to the community, their worthwhileness of working there, and their overall benefit to Chicago. But after the Great Chicago Fire, which gutted the center of the city, they were desperate for anything to come in. And so they scrapped all of those permissions or all of those permitting processes and conditional use processes and allowed anything to be built there. And I would draw an analogy between our massive budget deficit and the Great Chicago Fire. Because we're gonna need the money.
if we're gonna need the money, so we should let the businesses in. I have an anecdote too that's a little softer. My neighbor is one more person who would have had to leave the village. If she didn't happen to live in a zoning C area that was surrounded by B, she just happens to be. Yeah. Yeah, I guess her block is
Your B
is
is C, it's
adjacent
one or the
to,
other.
adjacent to the business district, so it happens to be C. It's built like B, it's mostly B-like houses, but she lives in a house with an attached addition in the back. It's an old house with a newer addition, and because she's in C, she was able to take the old garage and make it a studio apartment, so she can essentially retire there. She's got an Airbnb above her for some actual income, and she's creating an affordable rental for a family in the front of that. So there's 3 units in there. It's not a noise, it's not a nuisance. I'm very happy that all of them are there. I've never had a bad incident with Airbnb guests either.
And then, oh, yes, go ahead.
Could you go back, could you get to your slide that's actually suggesting what you're suggesting?
Sure. Oh, and if you got number 3, it's in there in detail too.
And I know we mentioned civil society, but you know, I've been a part of various organizations in the village, like say the Boy Scout troop for the local kids, and I just find it very unfortunate that organizations frequently fall apart because, you know, there's just not enough people to sustain them. Or an organization will fall apart and then a similar organization will come up, but there's no like transmission of the information from the old organization to the new. And I feel like that this is sort of just a symptom of the small amount of people here. It makes it difficult to maintain civic organizations.
Yeah.
You're blocking your slide. Just pointing out.
So this is not actually our proposal right now. So our current proposal is
You want the current proposal? All right, hold on. I got it. That's different.
More words, yeah.
yes. Our current proposal is to make duplexes and multifamily housing permitted use in all residential districts, as well as I said, to make apartments above businesses permitted use in the business district, and then to make multifamily housing a conditional use in the industrial district. Am I missing anything? Oh, maybe something. Here it is.
Other municipalities that are doing this.
Go to the top.
Are
This one?
giving incentives to build more than one accessory dwelling unit, like Portland, Oregon, which has had a terrible.
These are big cities, it's different situations.
Is it fundamentally different? Yeah.
LA is doing a major thing with ADUs.
Yeah, it's totally because they're a little further along in the complete unaffordability.
It's because they're 1,000 times larger than us.
The things that govern the problems, you know, if you get booted out of your town because you can't afford it, it's the same whether it's Portland or it's here.
Jessica.
I think we hear about this fear in big cities, but like we aren't looking at how it's actually affecting people here. There are lots of people who are constantly priced out. There are people my age who want to live here and we cannot afford it. It is already unaffordable to live here. If we want to take the school levy, for example, something that was said over and over and over is that people can't afford it and continue to live here. And that was a small amount of money, a relatively small amount of money for a lot of people who do, for some people who live here. But even that, like, what did they say? Like $100 something over the course of a year. A little bit, it was more than what the fire levy that just passed was. But there were lots of people who were having conversations about if this passes, I will need to sell my house, need to move out of my apartment because my landlord is going to raise the rent. And the other thing that hasn't been said is that every chance the Greene County Auditor gets to raise our tax rates, they do, because they say we are a desirable community, and because we are so desirable, they can raise the tax rates, which again makes it more unaffordable. So
Sort of movement against them.
Gotta make Yellow Springs that desirable.
Yes, we don't
or
want.
at least division faster, desirability.
Yes.
And if I correctly over the last few weeks that, in the paper that our utilities will be going up over the next few years. And my heart stopped as I did the math, because the clock is ticking so much louder when I don't with that. That will, the pressure, the vice of that. And at the same time, I like this 40-foot other heater plus, which was a garage that we bought and turned into one of the house. That was the only thing because it was this dollar structure, and we were right. And so it, I was 71, and I'm not the young person. $71. I don't know.
And to piggyback on that, it, especially I think with water, which is what's going on the most. If we had 100 more people or 200 or 300, then that overhead cost gets spread out to more people. So more people helps and more business.
That's partly where the Antioch students figure in, because Antioch students got a shower for the most part.
Occasionally, yeah.
I'd sort of be interested just to know, and I don't know from the people in here, I mean, I personally would like more residents in Yellow Springs, and I wonder, out of the current population, what percentage want more residents and what percentage don't want more residents? Because if we want more residents, we're gonna have to do something different.
So, I mean, I feel like it was somewhat evident during the over debate. Because essentially both sides said that they wanted to see more apartments. One of the attacks against the over development was that it did not contain apartments in it, and that basically that the housing was sort of too much large houses that were distant from each other, although it did include some townhouses. So
Yeah, it had some,
to me that,
but
to me
even
that
they-
signals to me.
It had duplexes.
But even, yeah, even there, the duplexes were like, okay, we got one street of the people of this economic zone.
And change it to only single family homes.
And
Yeah, and it is within the
Any of that, make it all just residential.
I don't disagree with you, but that is what the people were saying.
It's in, but we could have, Oberer could have presented something that would have been very agreeable to the village. Like, it could have been something that was affordable. They could have presented something that looks like the parts of town that are most desirable. Be 50-foot frontages with porches instead of garages on the front. And it was saved, a lot of expense for the village in the future, because when Oberer or somebody like them hands over a lot of road. Who said it? Oh, it was Michelle. I don't remember who she got her information.
She got it from like, some, I don't even remember. Let me dig it up.
New low density residential neighborhoods aren't gonna pay for themselves. They're gonna jazz our tax base for a little while until those roads and pipes and sidewalks need renovation, and then
And David Graham said the same thing.
Borrowing.
The county auditor said the same thing.
he agreed, yeah.
I'm sorry, just in case there were any over opponents that watch this, when I said, and that's what the people were saying, I'm not suggesting that argument was being made in bad faith. I truly believe that both sides were in affordable housing and apartments. I do regard the statements made during that debate to be indicative of the community's desires.
Denise had said that, I talked to Ms. Swinger about this, and she said that there's been no significant apartment constructions in Yellow Springs in the last 40 years. And every time a big developer comes through, she asks for apartments and they just don't do it.
They don't pay for themselves anymore.
Yeah, they also don't like want to see the year-long fight that was over.
They got another one. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So,
Let's start some talk.
Yeah, so I got a couple more thoughts. I would like to point out that this whole time, the whole issue of affordability. When we started looking for a house here 40 years ago. Okay. Basically, you spend twice as much and you get half the house where we were living. The whole thing about affordability is nothing new. Took us many, many years to find a house that was that we could afford.
Where did you live in the meantime?
I lived in Troy. I lived in a turn of the century Victorian that was massive and cost about a third of what my modest little shabbily built ranch house here cost.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's besides the point. My point is, this is nothing new. This has always been a desirable community. It's not a new issue.
It is.
Okay.
I will disagree. It's a new issue because housing costs related to income have increased. So across the country, housing has increased in accordance to income.
Yeah,
And in Yellow Springs, when I moved here, I lived in a huge house for $100 a month.
Well,
And now that, yes, and now proportionally, it would be much higher.
is there anyone that would like to speak that hasn't gotten a chance yet?
Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica's spoken.
Okay, I'm going to be a contrarian and say, I love single family residential. I love the big lots. I love the wildlife I see in them. I love the space. I love the ability to have parties and like have people park on the property and there's no parking on the street hardly already. So
about your chickens.
and my chickens and my, I don't. But I just love it. And one thing that makes me very sad is when I see a lot that is just covered with impervious surface, whether it's rooftops or whatever, because you've densified it. I just think you need all different kinds of zoning. I think the mix is good as it is. And I keep asking myself, what problem is it that you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Because when I was village manager, I got the message loud and clear. We want to be a village. We want to be a village. We want to be more of a village. We don't want to be a city that's 5,000 people, if you don't know that. We want to be a village. We do not want to go over 5,000 people.
I want opponents.
So
yes.
So, but who wants this? And you're not going to densify your way into affordable housing, by the way. So I think
I think I
certainly some of the solution to affordable housing. You have to subsidize the hell out of it.
But yeah, okay, well, truly affordable housing is a different matter than affordability or more affordability than we have now. My question to you is, are you willing to pay what it actually costs to live in a zoning A district at low
I
density?
think so too, because
I don't think you're paying close.
So I'm
not even close.
So I appreciate your forthrightness and sort of straightforwardness in just saying, I like single family housing. Personally, I like apartments.
Me too, as an American.
I like living in apartments. I like looking at them. I think they're great. So, those things, of course, can help guide our decisions in terms of where we personally want to live. But there's also a further question of to what extent should our personal tastes regarding what sort of developments we like to look at, how much should that constrain other people and where they can live and what they can put on their land? Especially if it also has other negative knock-on consequences for the economy and civil society and local businesses.
What consequences? What are your consequences for the environment?
I love that you have rabbits in your yard, but they belong in wilderness, and then where the people live, it's not always great to have raccoons living.
Thank you, Laura, for bringing up the environment, because indeed, apartments are, of course, better for the environment. Because per unit, they take less energy to heat and cool because they share walls with other units. They also tend to be smaller. They have less square footage. My apartment is extremely small. It's heated by just a space heater and a mini split. And I guess I have one vent.
I would wager that any skyscraper in New York City is more efficient, costs less overall, and
has a smaller impact on the
smaller impact on the environment than all of Yellow Springs.
Planted 2,000 trees.
And of course, the extent that you build up, the amount of impervious surface that you cover diminishes because you're instead of building out horizontally, you're building up vertically, right?
I think the environmental consequences can be argued on both sides. You're looking at energy, I'm looking at animals and trees, and also the space if you have to put solar panels. For example.
I think
New York has
So I
functional
guess-
public transit.
they do,
My question to counter that would be, would you rather have all residential A and have to build out past the urban service boundary? Or would you rather have slightly higher density and be able to keep the green belts and the?
I think we've paid the last cornfield.
You went back.
If you do density, right, then you have a presumption that then you will trade that off for open space other places.
Right.
That presumption never works out.
Never works
Never works out.
There is one way that it works out.
Conservation development.
Bingo. Thank you. We have common ground. I love conservation development.
Conservation development in residential A.
Yeah, well, you,
Yeah.
You do anywhere.
yeah, we should have conservation development mandated for anything that gets annexed. And I'd love to work with you on that. Laura.
So, I feel like we've had a very good conversation today. Yes?
You wanna go home? I'm ready to keep going.
Oh, no.
I think it's good to let this out.
Yeah, we're out of time. Hey, we're going to meet you. People can continue.
We are paying a babysitter.
Oh.
So.
But I think for the-
I'll say something to wrap up. Yeah, so. So. A recommendation, I understand where you're coming from, what you want to accomplish, and it's not just simple, okay? You mentioned, you brought in a whole host of other factors that have influenced your rationale. The problem, though, is if you're really going to put together something as a proposal or a more formal presentation, this is an informal group, it has to be very narrow and very focused, okay? And you have to have a real solid, narrow rationale. What I've been hearing here is at least 3 or 4 other, I don't want to call them peripheral, but 3 or 4 confounding elements that got thrown in, talking about affordability, talking about young families, talking about seniors, talking about wealthy people, talking about this, talking about that. And that just clouds the central point that you're trying to make, because every one of those topics is an emotional issue that's going to get people riled up.
Yeah.
And you need to figure out how to get as painfully narrow.
But what if a lot of problems have the same solution,
Yeah, it's very intersectional. We almost disagree on nothing else except this, the 3 of us.
But we almost agree on nothing else than this, yes.
Yeah.
I disagree.
The 3-headed monster ends its presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
We'll do this again, huh? Because this issue is not going away, so we have to